You detailed your process. I found this on some blog you wrote 10 years ago.
Oh, no.
You have this 3-step process: story treatment, narrative design, and dialogue.
Yeah.
It's just...
It's maybe a little bit of a simplification, but I think so much of being a consultant is trying to get people down to brass tacks. Because often you get called in at the beginning of a project where people are maybe spinning their wheels a little bit on the story, so they call a consultant. Or they might be like halfway through development or more and have just gotten really lost in the weeds with their narrative because they didn't have it structured and thought out as well as they thought they did. So, so a lot. So for me, I'm not super big on theory and discussions about theme and stuff, but I'm more like, look, I don't care what medium you have or what the scope of the game is. Do you have a story that has some kind of beginning, middle, and end? And if so, then you ought to be able to write a brief story treatment to illustrate that. And if you can't, then there's a problem, right? Like there's an old saying: if there's a problem in the third act, it's actually in the first act. So let's lay our foundation down, make sure we have a story. And then the narrative design is, like I talked about before, it's just being really specific about, like, step by step, take me through the game, and show me where, when, and how we're telling the story and where the gameplay sequences are. And then at some point you're ready for dialogue, which is usually the easy part. And I'm glossing over a few other steps, but...
Well, when and how often are story treatments part of a game's production? Is it part of a pitch, or do you have to make a treatment halfway through? Like, here's I'm going to fix your game.
Yeah, it might be part of a pitch, but it might be pretty brief. Like maybe you would do for a pitch, possibly a 1-page, but still beginning, middle, and end, and highlight the chief. Highlight the protagonist, the antagonist, the chief conflicts they're in. And probably nobody reads that, right, at the pitch level. But I think for when pre-design starts in development, it's like, I mean, you if you can't, if the story is important to the game you're working on, if you can't write a 2 to 3 page treatment that describes your story in beginning, middle, and end, you don't have a story. You haven't broken the story. I wrote another blog somewhere where I talk about how common it was, or how often I've seen, I think, game developers confuse having an idea for a story.
Yeah, I saw this. Yeah,
I saw that with an actual story. Like an actual story, again, beginning, middle, and end. Take me through. Like your favorite movie that you've seen 100 times, you could probably sit there and describe to me beginning, middle, and end, what happens. And if you can't do that for the game you're about to develop, you're probably going to run into problems. Maybe it sounds simplistic, but I think it's true.
When you're doing a treatment, like as part of the early game's production, isn't at that stage almost like the mechanics and concept of the gameplay more important? Like, is there a tug-of-war there?
No, it is more important. So, obviously, if you're the narrative designer or whomever, you're well informed of the type of game you're making and what the chief gameplay mechanics are, and that really informs, what kind of story you're telling. So, first-person shooter, or third-person shooter, and a rollicking action tale with some heart, or if it's, something else like a Leisure Suit Larry game, then you know what features you have, you design, the story is more conducive to that, set of features and that type of game. So yeah, it is, what type of game you're making, and what the chief mechanics are, and what features you'll have for gameplay and for storytelling, and it is more important. So there shouldn't be too much of a tug-of-war there, because game design should probably win most of the time, every time.
Well, one thing I've seen on your blog too is you were talking about like this book, Invisible Ink, that you used.
Yeah.
And like that's one of these Hollywood screenwriting books,
Yeah.
right? Like what's the other one? Like Save the Cat and all these types of books
It's
like
a
that.
little different. Like so, Save the Cat gets a bad rep. It's seen as very oversimplistic. I actually think like if you've never written a screenplay before and you don't know where to start, I think it's actually a good little primer.
Save the Cat is.
Save the Cat, and I don't think I think at some point you stop clinging to it and you feel comfortable enough to expand your horizons there. But Brian McDonald, Invisible Ink, it is quite different. I think it is more a book about storytelling in general, and Invisible Ink is really a handy way. I reference it a lot, and it's a really there's a good process in there for coming up with a story, beginning, middle, and end. I think it's, I don't know, once upon a time, and every day, until one day, and because of that, and because of that, and because of that, until finally, and ever since that day. And I've used that outline. I use that before to sort of outline stories, at a high level before getting more, and then fleshing it out more into like a real treatment. And he has another excellent book called, I think it's the Golden Theme. I can't remember. Brian McDonald. All those books are pretty great, and they're quick reads.
That kind of reminds me a little bit. I saw this lecture that the Trey Parker and the other guy gave, the South Park guys. They would talk about how like you should never be able to describe your story as like this happened and then this happened. It should always be like this happened because that happened,
right?
Or whatever.
Right,
It's like
right,
it should never just be and because it's just a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. A bunch of things happening. Just because the writer decided they should happen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's more about causation,